So we kicked off 2025 with a depressing as video, but let's get busy because you haven't heard me speak good rugby league chat since the Pacific Championships. Pre-season is less than a month away and my cricket addiction is well and truly on the decline since the Aussies won the BGT. We have team previews to get to, we have predictions which I will be dropping in early February, and all the other classic pre-season content. But before we get to that and start pissing off certain fan bases, let's all enjoy the hope that we currently have. And with that hope, let's look at what are my most anticipated games of 2025, and regardless of who's winning, who's losing, and which coaches have already been unfairly sacked, these are the storylines that deserve their own singles match at WrestleMania. Shout out to my wrestling fans. These are the games that put bums in seats, eyes on the TV, whether it's history, hatred, and more specifically to 2025, we've got some big signings who are going to be facing off against their former families. But ladies and gentlemen, as always, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet already, leave a comment down below. What are your most anticipated games of 2025? And let's do what we have to do and give out some honorable mentions so you guys don't absolutely roast me in the comments. Now, we're not including the finals or the grand final because, well, isn't that obvious? Because that literally does become the biggest games of the season. But we don't know who's going to be in them yet. We don't know who's playing Manly in the grand final, so we can all just put the pause on that one. I don't need any of you being this little cheeky smart us with your fingers and thumbs in that comment section. Also, we're keeping this to just NRL because I have a state of origin lust that no one else on this platform comes close to, and those three games are better than anything else we're going to see this year, especially after they had a biff on the sideline last year. So we're not including finals, alright? We're not including the grand final, we're not including state of origin. Now, the honourable mentions I have got down here are, of course, the Anzac games. More specifically, obviously, we have the Roosters and the Dragons. They will play at Allianz Stadium, one of the great occasions of the regular season. No matter how well or bad either of these teams are going, they always manage to make this game at least competitive, except for last year. And it does feel like the Roosters have dominated this fixture, however, I'm too lazy to actually look that up. I've got the feeling that both of these teams, especially with the Roosters still missing likely Brennan Smith and Sam Walker from their ACLs last year, are going to be on the similar wavelength when it comes to where they are sitting on the ladder. So hopefully that is going to be a great game. Either way, it will be a great occasion once again. One of the highlights of the Rugby League regular season calendar. We have Magic Round, which is always a great time, a great round for all the fans, but the games suck this year. So that's why I haven't got any games in the actual list, because the NRL decided they're going to sell it out anyway. It's for the fans, not so much about what's happening on the field. So let's throw all the Sunday 2 PM games in this one. You got your Dragons Sharks, you got your Titans Broncos, you got all those little rivalry games that don't mean much to me, but they may mean much to those fans. But I've got the big dogs in here. So let's go through my list. What are the biggest NRL games for me in 2025? The ones I am looking forward to the most. And let's just get the real obvious one out of the way. Because as much as it pains me to say, it is definitely the biggest rivalry we've got in the NRL. And I do look forward to these games every year, even though both teams seem to love kicking mine out of finals footy in September. The Roosters and the Rabbitohs, they play each other in round 5 at Accor, but round 27 will be at Allianz. That is the big one. Shout out to Accor Stadium, but if our game's biggest rivalry still looks like a park footy game because of your venue, then that isn't the one that I'm going to love. I look to that round 27 clash, the final round of the regular season, and I've got a feeling we might see a similar situation to what we did when they opened in Allianz a few years ago. I've got both these teams hanging around the top 8. The Rabbitohs have a big season, and so do the Roosters as well, which adds a little bit of spice to this one. Latrell Mitchell, Angus Crichton, just two of the big names who decide to jump between these teams because we all know this is secretly a joint venture. The best Rabbitohs juniors go to play for the Roosters and vice versa. That is why they end up punching on, or at least nowadays grabbing each other by the collar every time they play. But it's going to be the final round of the regular season, which doesn't help these teams if they are in a good position, because they're never going to rest while everyone else in the top 4 and top 8 will be resting their players. It may be an unfair advantage considering this will basically be an extra finals game for both these teams a week early, but hey, deal with it. Then we have the grand final rematch, and honestly at this point, I think Panthers and Storms, even if it wasn't a grand final rematch, would be on this list because since the Roosters 2019, Penrith have really stepped into that position as the second premiership heavyweight alongside the Melbourne Storm, and at this point, Penrith are undoubtedly the number one when it comes to those two. Melbourne Storm, ever since that 2020 grand final, really have never gotten over the Penrith Panthers. I know they did the double over them in the regular season last year, but when it comes to big important finals games, Penrith have had the wood over them ever since 2021 prelim, 2023 prelim, and in the grand final last year, Melbourne were coming in with all this momentum, and Penrith dominated them from the opening minute. You've got, in my opinion, the greatest coach of all time in Craig Bellamy going up against the greatest coach right now, which is Ivan Cleary, which is a very interesting situation that seems to happen in modern sport these days, where you have the GOAT and then the current greatest facing off at the same time. You got the two best halfbacks in the world, the most important position in rugby league, and you've even got Cameron Munster, who is the biggest X-Factor superstar, going up against Nathan Cleary, who's undoubtedly the best player in the competition, like I've already said, just like his daddy is the best coach. It's a family with ginormous chins, but they're building even greater trophy cabinets, and going up against the Melbourne Storm, it will be a great contest once again. They play each other 2 times because the rugby league gods aren't stupid, that being PVL and Andrew Abdo, because they know that this game is going to be must watch. Craig Bellamy is going to be frothing for revenge, and with these two teams being at the top, it's these two games like we saw last year that could end up deciding the minor premiership, top 4, top 2, whatever else you want to call it. But from Melbourne's greatest rival currently to their greatest rival of all time, and this time they're going to have to come to the god place of rugby league on a Sunday arvo. The Battle of Brookie will return to Sunday afternoon football for the first time since early 2020, where Manly were washing balls before we got hit by a pandemic. Yes, Roosters and Rabbitohs may be the biggest rivalry, but I don't feel like that we've seen more animosity between teams than we have in this one over the past 15 years, because they're never great games of footy, but I feel like there's 50,000 pushes and shoves in these games. 2023 was an absolute ripper, 2024 was even better, and Manly always seem to have the wood over the Melbourne Storm at Brookie Oval. Manly haven't been great on the whole for the past 10 years or so, and yet they always find a way to beat Melbourne at Brookie Oval by turning it into just an absolute dogfight. With the Justin Olam hit just a few years ago, we had the Defua hit, we of course had the Battle of Brookie, which really reignited this whole thing after their back-to-back grand finals. This is really just a personal one for me, but this is, in my opinion, the most hated rivalry in the entire sport at the moment. But there is one team that may hate Manly a bit more than Melbourne do right now, and that is, of course, the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. A lot of that might be my fault, but Manly and the Bulldogs will clash in round 21. Again, the Doggies have seemed to skip Brookie Oval. I guess it wasn't enough that Manly absolutely smashed them and then kicked him out of the comp in their own backyard last year. But there is a TBA on the venue for this, and the main reason I've got it on here is because I really hope it's Belmore Oval. Now, me and the lads who went probably will not survive going to Belmore Oval, especially after Manly put the cleaners through the Bulldogs yet again. But I feel like it would be the perfect storm and would be such a great occasion. Manly, who knocked out the Doggies during what was meant to be the year of betting your house on the Doggies, left all the fans homeless. They've smashed them at a core, and now they have to go to their spiritual home. I think that is so good, so great, and a lot better than the next game I've got on this list, which is the Rabbitohs versus the Broncos round 10. And you may be thinking, what on earth does that have to do with anything? Well, it's got a bit of Wayne Bennett vibes, but that game marks the return of Ezra Mam, and I don't want to speak anymore. But yeah, it is going to be some sort of watch. And speaking of returns, we have the return of the King, because in round 5, the Dragons will take on the Eels at CommBank Stadium. The King of Parramatta returns to take over that city once again. The Dragons and the Eels, not much history between them, especially in recent years. They've both been a bit lean, but of course that incredible comeback the Dragons nearly pulled off against the Eels, who struggled last year. year. But King Gutho, after the way he was treated by the Dragons from the outside in, he gets to return and he gets to put on a show. And it will be a big game. It's the start of the season for both. Jason Riles versus Shane Flanagan. Both coaches will be looking to make a statement. And then obviously we got Zach Lomax taking on the Dragons. But mainly we got the King returning to his palace. And speaking of the Eels, this game has to be in there. The Bulldogs and the Eels on the King's birthday in round 14 at Accor Stadium. That is going to be an absolute barn burner, especially if the Doggies can go well. And if the Eels can pull their end of the bargain and go well this year, this game will be incredible. This fixture has been so good the last couple of years. Unfortunately, both teams decide not to win at the same time, it seems. But obviously, we had Birdo Bulldoze Mitchell Moses. The crowd was absolutely erupting last year as the Bulldogs pulled off a miracle comeback, and that really was the point where everyone took the Bulldogs seriously. That is probably the number 2 rivalry. I can't wait for it. It is going to be sick. And of course, Josh Adokar will be taking on his former club as well. But when it comes to returns, there is none bigger than this. And unfortunately, they're bulldozing Penrith Panthers Stadium, which doesn't exactly make this as romantic as it should be. But Penrith versus Jerome Luai. The Tigers versus the Penny Panthers. You got Taruva and the Prince Jerome Luai returning to take on Nathan Cleary. Cleary and Luai have basically been together since the start of their careers. Outside of Australia versus Samoa, I've never seen these two play each other. They've played with New South Wales together and dominated. They've obviously dominated the NRL the past couple of years together, but now they go one-on-one in the NRL. We get them in round 14 and 21, both at CommBank Stadium, and if the Tigers are on the up, doing what the Bulldogs did last year, if Jerome Luai can be the front man of that, then we're going to get some sick fixtures between those two this year. And that is probably the game that I'm looking forward to the most. But there is 2 fixtures that I've got on here. Originally, I had this in the honourable mentions, but I have to have them on here. We got Warriors and Raiders and Panthers v Sharks kicking off the year in Las Vegas. It was such a success from at least Australia last year. Those were the 2 best opening round games I think I've seen because of the intensity, and they both offered different things. Broncos and Roosters was more your traditional match, and then Manly and Rabbitohs was basically an outscore each other contest. This may just be selfish, Ranger, because my team's not involved, but I'm also interested to see how the whole weekend plays out. I don't really agree with the NRL extending it, and I don't think they've made the best decision in terms of the 2 fixtures that they decided to put on. Warriors Raiders basically is a Friday 6 p.m. game. You got Panthers and you got the Sharks, which I guess is a bit of a top 4 clash, especially with AFB moving there. But why wouldn't you just have Warriors versus Panthers and have the Sharks play like another team that's in the mix for finals footy the last couple of years? I get they went the Raiders because the Las Vegas Raiders, but the Raiders don't really have a big market, and I lived in Canberra for at least 18 months, so I know how boring of a city that actually is. I don't think it's smart to extend the thing to 4 games. I get you want the English Super League fans going over there, but if I'm an American and I'm tuning in and seeing 4 games and 2 of them are from different competitions, then I'm kind of confused. I get having the women's game, but then also having the NRL games on either side of that. No one is staying for all 4 games. You're never going to get the atmosphere you did last year because 3 games at Magic Round is bad enough. The 4 games here is going to be absolutely brutal. I do hope it works, and I'm really excited to see what actually happens if we get an improvement or if it was just a 1-year novelty and that's already starting to wear off. But ladies and gentlemen, those are my most anticipated games of 2025 in the NRL season as we sit here in early January. This could all change, especially when Manly's at the top of the table and they're taking on the Tigers in a top of the table clash. You may be laughing, but there is a multiverse where that is happening right now. But ladies and gentlemen, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet already. Leave a comment down below. Do you agree with my picks for my most anticipated games of 2025? Or are you going to not even watch the games I picked on my list? But do the big 3, whatever I just said. And of course, I'll see you in the next one.